let me say something that sounds like I'm about to get banned from a family group chat. I think supply and demand, profit and loss, might be more powerful than any deity. Relax, relax, relax. Don't throw your phone away. Just hear me out. Hear me out for a minute. Because I'm not talking about heaven. I'm talking about behavior. Because whatever consistently controls human behavior at scale starts to look a lot like power if you think about it. And when I look around, I don't see people moving in response to summons alone. I see people moving in response to prices. Let's define what we're comparing. Deity in the traditional sense sets moral expectations, guides behavior through belief, influence choice through meaning. Economics in its raw form, supply and demand, profit and loss, incentives and consequences. One appeals to belief, the other responds to behavior. Now, here's the uncomfortable part though. Behavior doesn't wait for belief to agree. Nobody wakes up and says, today I will obey supply and demand. But everybody does. You want something? Price matters. You offer something? Demand matters. You make decisions? Profit and loss matters. It's invincible, but it's everywhere. Like gravity with receipts. Religion varies across culture. Different names, different rules, different interpretations. But supply and demand? Same rules in Lagos, Tokyo, New York, and Sao Paulo. If something is scarce and desired, value rises. If something is abundant and ignored, value drops. No translations needed. No denomination required. But here's the test nobody likes though. If something becomes expensive, people change behavior. If something becomes profitable, people pursue it. If something creates loss, people avoid it. Now, compare that to moral systems. People say this is wrong. But if the incentive is strong enough, behavior sometimes override beliefs. Not always, but often enough to notice. But let's make it uncomfortable. There are things people say that they believe until it becomes expensive to believe them. Honesty is great until it costs you money. Loyalty is beautiful until it limits opportunity. Principles are powerful until they come with real sacrifice. That is where the real test happens, not in theory, in cost. The market doesn't ask what you believe, it asks what you will pay or accept. You can believe in fairness, but if rent goes up, your belief adjusts to your budget. You can believe in loyalty, but if opportunity doubles your income, you start having serious conversation. The market doesn't argue, it reveals. Economics runs on incentives. Incentives shapes decision. Decisions shape behavior. Behavior shapes society. So even if belief exists, incentives quietly guide action. Not because people are evil, because people respond to pressure. And incentives are pressure with math behind them. But let's be honest, people say they worship higher principles. But look at how they move. Career decisions, relationship choices, time allocation, risk tolerance. A lot of those decisions orbit around money, opportunity, security. Now, that is not judgment, that's observation. Because what you consistently prioritize starts to look like what you serve. Now, let's balance it a little bit. Economics alone doesn't create morality. Markets don't care if something is right, they care if something is profitable. That's why societies create rules, laws, ethics, regulations to limit what pure incentive would do, right? Because if profit is the only compass, some outcomes get ugly very quickly. So now we have tension, right? Belief says this is what should happen. Economics says this is what people will respond to. And when those two collide, economics often moves faster because belief requires agreement, incentive requires reaction. But let's keep it simple for a minute. People say support local business, but if a cheaper option exists, many people choose price over principle. Not because they hate local businesses, because incentives are louder than slogans. That's the pattern, repeated across industries, across countries, across time. Entire countries adjust behavior based on economic pressure, trade agreement, currency shift, resource availability, labor market, policy decisions, not because a deity changed, because incentive change. That is power. Quiet power, systematic power. But people like to believe they are guided purely by values. But values often operate within economic boundaries. You can value generosity, but your ability to give depends on resources. You can value independence, but your independence depends on income. So economics doesn't erase value, it frames them. But here's the hard truth though. If a system consistently changes behavior across billions of people, that system has power. And supply and demand does that daily. No speeches, no sermons, just outcomes. That does not make it divine at all, no. But it makes it influential, very influential. But now let's be precise. A deity shapes meaning. Economics shapes movement. Meaning influences why people act. Movement determines what actually happens. So the question becomes, which one has more visible impact on daily behavior? not eternal truth, daily behavior. That's the comparison here. Adam Smith called it the invisible hand. Not mystical, just a way to describe how individual choices aggregate into collective outcomes. Nobody plans it, but everybody participates in it. That is what makes it powerful. Decentralized influence, mass coordination without central command. Let's not get carried away, right? Economics cannot answer purpose, meaning, morality, love, even identity. It can price things, but it cannot define why they matter. So while it's powerful, it's incomplete. Now, the real world operates on both, right? Belief tells people what should matter. Economics determine what they actually respond to. Healthy societies try to align the two, not let one dominate completely. Because if belief ignores reality, it becomes ineffective. If economics ignore morality, it becomes destructive. So when I say supply and demand feels more powerful than a deity, I am not saying it replaces beliefs. No, I am saying it reveals behavior. Because people may say one thing, but incentive often expose another. And exposure feels like power. So maybe the better way to say it is this though. Deities shape intentions. Economics shapes execution. And execution is what we see every day. So because if you really want to understand what people value, don't just listen to what they say. Watch what they pay for. Watch what they chase. Watch what they avoid. Because behavior already lies even when words do. So maybe supply and demand is not more powerful than belief, right? It's just more honest about how people actually move. So we ask this honestly though, do people follow what they believe or do they follow what rewards them? Anyhow, pay attention.